The garage sale looked like hundreds of others I had driven past that summer. Folding tables, cardboard boxes, old kitchen appliances nobody wanted anymore. I almost didn't stop, but something caught my eye near the edge of the driveway. A painting leaning against a plastic chair. It wasn't large, maybe 2 feet wide. The frame was old and slightly cracked, and the canvas showed a quiet landscape, an empty road stretching through a forest at sunset. There was nothing obviously special about it. No famous signature, no ornate frame. Still, something about it made me slow down. I walked over and picked it up. The brushwork was surprisingly detailed. The colors had depth, more effort than someone would usually put into a cheap garage sale painting. The woman running the sale noticed me looking at it. "You like that one?" she asked. "Maybe," I said. "How much?" She glanced at the painting like she had forgotten it was even there. $3. $3 for a painting that clearly took someone time to make. I shrugged and pulled a few crumpled bills from my wallet. "All right, I'll take it." I had no idea that purchase would cause police officers to show up at my house 2 days later. The painting hung on my living room wall for almost 24 hours before I noticed the first strange detail. It happened late that night. I was sitting on the couch when something about the lower corner caught my attention. A faint marking, barely visible beneath the frame. Curious, I took the painting down. The signature wasn't painted on top of the canvas like most artists did. It had been scratched lightly into the paint itself. Just 2 letters, A.R. That was it. Nothing else. No date, no full name, just those initials. For a moment, I wondered if the artist had simply run out of space, or maybe it was a beginner who didn't want to sign their full name yet. Still, something about the letters looked deliberate, almost hidden. I ran my finger across them. That was when I felt something strange. The canvas wasn't flat. There was something underneath it. I flipped the painting over and examined the back. The frame had been resealed, not professionally. Someone had opened it before and then nailed it back together. The nails looked newer than the wood, which meant someone had recently removed the canvas. My curiosity started to grow. Carefully, I pulled one of the nails out with a small screwdriver, then another. Within a minute, the back panel loosened enough for me to lift it. What I saw underneath the canvas made me freeze. There was another painting hidden behind the first one. The second painting was nothing like the quiet landscape on the front. This one was darker, disturbing. It showed a narrow alleyway at night, a single streetlight casting a pale yellow glow, and beneath that streetlight, a man lying on the ground. Another figure stood nearby, their face hidden in shadow, but the position of their arm made it clear what had happened. The man on the ground had been shot. The image was so detailed it felt less like a painting and more like a memory. I stared at it for several seconds. Then something else caught my attention. There was writing along the edge of the canvas, very small, almost invisible. I leaned closer. The words made my stomach tighten. May 18th, 11:42 p.m. The date bothered me enough that I decided to search it online, just out of curiosity. I typed the date into my laptop, then added the words "local shooting." Within seconds, a news article appeared. The headline read, "Local businessman found shot in downtown alley." The article described a crime that happened on May 18th at exactly 11:42 p.m. in a narrow alley behind a restaurant downtown. My eyes slowly moved back to the painting, the alley, the streetlight, the exact position of the victim. The painting wasn't just similar to the crime scene. It matched it perfectly. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it, expecting a delivery. Instead, 2 police officers stood on my porch. "Are you Daniel Carter?" one of them asked. "Yes?" "We'd like to ask you a few questions." My heart started beating faster. "What about?" The older officer glanced past me into the house. "About a painting you recently purchased." They sat at my kitchen table while I explained the garage sale, the woman selling it, the $3 price, everything. One officer wrote notes, the other watched my face carefully. "Where is the painting now?" he asked. "In the living room." They stood and walked over to look at it. The younger officer studied the landscape painting on the front. "Did you open the frame?" I hesitated. "Yeah." Both officers exchanged a look. "Can we see the back?" the older one asked. I nodded slowly and flipped the painting around. The moment the officer saw the hidden painting, the room went quiet. The younger officer leaned closer. His expression changed immediately. "Where did you say you bought this again?" "A garage sale." The older officer pulled out his phone and took several photos of the canvas. Then he looked at me. "Sir, this painting depicts an active homicide investigation." My throat went dry. "I figured that out." He nodded slowly. "Then you probably understand why we need to take this with us." Before they left, the younger officer asked one last question. "Did the seller say where she got it?" "No." He frowned slightly. "That's strange." "Why?" He looked back at the painting. "Because we believe the person who painted this," he paused, "was standing at the crime scene when it happened." 3 days passed before the police contacted me again. This time, they asked me to come to the station. The detective waiting for me looked tired. He slid a photo across the desk. "Do you recognize this person?" It was the woman from the garage sale. "Yes." He sighed. "She's been missing for 2 weeks." My chest tightened. What does that have to do with the painting? The detective leaned back in his chair. "We found several more paintings in her house." He paused. "All of them showed different crimes." The detective opened a folder and showed me the photographs. Each painting depicted a different scene, a car crash, a robbery, another shooting, all painted with the same eerie detail. Every one of them matched a real crime, but what the detective said next was worse. "These paintings weren't made after the crimes," he said quietly. "They were painted before." I felt the room go cold. "Before?" He nodded. "Days before, sometimes weeks." I stared at the photos again, trying to understand what that meant. The detective folded his hands. "There's one more thing." He slid another photograph across the desk. It was a new painting, one I had never seen before. The scene showed a small house, my house, and standing in the front yard was a man holding a painting. The detective looked at me carefully. "We believe this was painted yesterday." My mouth went dry. "What happens in the painting?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he slowly turned the photograph toward me and pointed to the corner of the canvas, where the date had been written. Tomorrow.